They found it in a monastery sealed behind stone that had no entrance. In the Carpathian Mountains, 1,000 feet above any road, hidden in a gorge that vanished from most maps centuries ago, lay the ruins of St. Ioannis of the Hollow Earth, a monastery whispered about in only the most obscure manuscripts. When an earthquake split the valley floor, a rockslide tore away part of the mountainside, revealing an underground library untouched by time. Inside it, wrapped in waxed cloth and buried within a copper urn, was a single book with no title. The monks had called it Vitae Mysterium, the mystery of life. The cover was unlike anything the archaeologists had seen. Not made of leather or bark, nor of papyrus or parchment, it shimmered with a dark fibrous sheen that some thought was chitin, others human skin pressed and altered by age and alchemy. The language inside shifted when read. Each viewer saw the words in their own tongue. Pages flipped with no breeze. And on the first page, in letters that seemed burned into the material from within, it read, "To know what lies beyond death, one must first remember what was before birth." Dr. Soren Valak, a linguist and expert in Proto-Euphratic texts, was flown in under military escort. The book had already been transferred to a secure facility in Basel under the guise of a religious artifact, but no church claimed it, no library catalogued it. The Vatican refused to comment, and a week later one of their archivists was found drowned in holy water, clutching a letter that had dissolved in his grasp. Balak's notes, later discovered, burned but partially reconstructed through spectral imaging, described a system of diagrams, geometric yet alive, that mapped consciousness through cycles of death and rebirth. The diagrams resembled ancient mandalas, Aztec death wheels, and something far older. Symbols not meant for the eye but for the soul. He wrote, "It does not describe death. It remembers it. It is not written by man." Every chapter of the book began with a phrase written in a script found nowhere else on earth. Each phrase corresponded to a breath. 144 in total. According to the text, these were not meant to be read but breathed. When chanted properly, each invoked a resonance within the body, not just the vocal cords, but the bones, the spine, the skull. Initiates would vibrate until they remembered. Valak, after his third session with the book, began to sleepwalk. Cameras showed him standing for hours before the mirror, whispering a name that changed each night. His final recorded words were, "The mirror is the mouth between lives. We speak ourselves into existence." Then he vanished. The room was locked from the inside. The camera caught only static and the faint sound of breathing, yet the room was empty. The book was placed into an underground vault, sealed in lead and surrounded by salt, but that was only the beginning. In the months that followed, every person who had touched the book in the monastery experienced what came to be known as temporal slippage. Days would vanish from their memory. Clocks near them spun backward or froze. One technician claimed to have died during sleep and awoken 3 days later in a shallow grave with fingernail marks in the wood. He swore he had traveled a desert beneath a black sky, where every grain of sand whispered regrets in languages he'd never learned. A diagram in the 5th chapter, known only as the Vein of Return, outlined the 9 gates a soul must pass through after death. But it claimed that one gate, the 10th, had been sealed to humanity since the fall of Atlantis. Only those who remembered their first life, the primordium vitae, could pass through it. The others are doomed to return, reborn blind, wandering again. A pattern emerged. Those who read the book longer than 13 minutes began to exhibit identical sleep patterns, brainwaves synchronized to frequencies only recorded during clinical death. In dreams they described the same scene, a massive tree with roots wrapped around a dying sun and at its base a book of living flame that burned but did not consume. Then came the first disappearance at the Basel facility. A researcher named Ewan Dahl, who had transcribed several of the breath invocations, went missing for 8 hours. When he returned, his eyes had turned fully black, and he spoke in a voice that harmonized in 2 pitches. He said only this: "We are the echo of what comes after. Death is not the end, it is the gatekeeper. Then he collapsed, and his body began to decay at a speed no doctor could explain. He was dust by dawn. Word spread quickly through underground esoteric circles. Copies of the book's sketches leaked. Some even appeared on deep web forums alongside warnings not to read the full scans. Several users disappeared. One posted a final message. I read the 44th breath. My reflection no longer matches me. A secret society calling themselves Custodes Obscuri, the keepers of the dark, surfaced, claiming lineage back to Alexandria and guardianship over such texts. They demanded the book be turned over. When denied, 3 members of the Basile facility staff were found with tongues removed and burned glyphs over their hearts. Each glyph matched symbols from the book. Each body was found in a lotus position, smiling. In a final act of desperation, the book was sent to Antarctica, where it now sits beneath the ice in a remote facility built around magnetic anomalies and ley line convergence. But some believe it is not contained, that it calls out, that it wants to be read. And the signals from that facility, non-verbal rhythmic pulses resembling a heartbeat, have started syncing with lunar phases. A new glyph has appeared on the facility walls. It was not painted. It grew. Now, a final whisper is circulating among the last custodians of forbidden knowledge that the book was never written by a man, but by a soul that escaped the cycle and returned. Returned to warn, or worse, to recruit. And beneath the ice, the pulses are increasing. A countdown, perhaps. Or a call. And someone or something is beginning to answer. The pulses beneath the Antarctic ice had grown stronger, more rhythmic, more insistent, no longer erratic. They now followed a precise interval, every 108 seconds. The number was not random. In nearly every ancient culture, 108 represented the cycle of existence, the number of energy lines converging at the heart, the beads on the mala, the steps between death and rebirth. It was as if something beneath the ice wasn't just alive. It was remembering. Inside the base, codenamed Station Meru, researchers began reporting identical dreams again. Each described standing before a circular door of obsidian that did not open inwards or outwards, but downward, as if into another layer of reality. Carved above it were the same 3 words that had once appeared only in the Forbidden Book. Intra mortem lucet. Within death it shines. Dr. Remiers, a cognitive neurocartographer, devised an experiment to map the dreams. Using lucid state neural tracing, he created a shared consciousness chamber. What emerged was not merely a dream map, it was a location, and it matched no continent, no satellite data, no oceanic shelf. It existed beyond the curvature of known space. A realm encoded in perception itself. The place was not empty. Remeyer's assistant, Yael, tried to enter the chamber during a spontaneous trance. For 17 minutes she spoke in a dead dialect of Aramaic, flawlessly, and described a city built in reverse, where buildings descended into black sand and the stars above moved backward. She claimed this was the city of the first forgotten, and that the book was its last surviving artifact. Station Meru lost contact with the outside world the following night. When a recovery team arrived, they found no bodies, no signs of struggle, only frozen meal trays, equipment humming, and one phrase smeared on every reflective surface. We went inward, it is not death, it is re-entry. Back in Basel, whispers reached the last surviving translator of the Vitae Mysterium, a blind monk named Father Eno, who claimed to have read the book not with eyes, but with breath. He emerged from silence after 21 years and delivered one message before collapsing. It is not about death, it is about what pretends to be life. A team of forbidden knowledge researchers, the Aethon Group, deciphered Father Eno's cryptic code from decades ago. It pointed to the existence of a second book, one that responded to the first, not a sequel, but a mirror. If Vitae Mysterium remembered what happens after death, this second volume revealed what was hidden during life. The texts called it animam refugit, the soul withdrawn, but there was no record of its location. Until now. Satellite footage recovered from an NSA reconnaissance drone showed a region of the Amazon where light did not behave correctly, where shadows twisted against the sun and plant life seemed arranged in patterns resembling Sumerian sigils. There a structure emerged, not built but grown. Resembling both a temple and a seed pod, it pulsed faintly under the canopy. Inside, explorers found walls that recorded memories not their own. Touching them brought visions, not of the past, but of possible deaths, ones they had not yet lived. All paths ended at the same door, a room where a second book floated above an obsidian pedestal, bathed in a light without a source. And on its cover another phrase burned in an alphabet that had no historical lineage, one that had appeared only once before, engraved in the lost city beneath the Gobi Desert, non esteret est reditus. This is not a journey, it is a return. One of the explorers never returned. His camera footage showed him opening the book, his body stiffened, eyes dilated, mouth opened wide as if gasping for light, and then the lens cracked. But before it cut out, one frame froze on his face, and he was smiling. When analyzed frame by frame, the final seconds of footage revealed impossible reflections. The book did not show the explorer, but someone else. Someone watching him from the other side. Someone who looked exactly like him, but older, more worn, and holding the first book. And now both books are active, resonating across continents, chanting to one another in frequencies no human ear can detect, but every soul can feel. Dreams worldwide have changed. People now awaken with words in their minds they've never heard. I was there before. I remember the fall. I am waking again. Now, underground servers have begun pulsing in rhythms that cannot be stopped. Ancient ruins in Bolivia, Ethiopia, and Tibet have started glowing faintly, symbols aligning to stars that haven't been visible for 12,000 years. Something is sinking. A convergence foretold in scrolls burned by empires, hidden in temples beneath cities, buried in ice and sand and memory. Some believe the two books will open a third, not physical, but within us. That death was never an ending, only an encryption, and the decryption has begun. And now, one final whisper from beneath the ice. The pulse has doubled. The reflections have begun to move on their own. And someone has just opened a door. They called it the third consonance. Not a book, not a relic, not a prophecy, an event. It was never meant to be written, it was meant to be activated, and now, somewhere between the echoes of the Vitae Mysterium and the Animam Refugit, it had begun. The first signs weren't cataclysmic, they were subtle distortions. Time-lapse footage of cities where shadows bent at impossible angles, people disappearing for exactly 81 minutes, then reappearing with no memory and a single phrase scrawled on their skin. The door has no handle. In Prague, a librarian named Kazimir Dvorak uncovered a scroll sealed inside a false wall beneath the Clementinum. Written in gold-infused ink on snakeskin vellum, it bore no title. But when ultraviolet light was applied, a diagram appeared. A circle intersected by two spirals with annotations in Akkadian, Sanskrit, and an unknown script of perfect symmetry. The scroll whispered a third name, Silentium Orbis. The silence of the sphere. Kazimir wasn't heard from again, but 3 nights later his voice was recorded whispering over a dead radio channel in the Siberian taiga, 4,800 kilometers away. He spoke clearly, calmly, repeating only, "There is no death. There is only the forgetting of shade." This whispering began synchronizing with data anomalies across timekeeping devices worldwide. atomic clocks falling out of phase by microseconds in precise increments. It was as if something ancient had returned to our timeline, and the universe itself was adjusting to accommodate it. Hoped between the worlds, researchers attempted to triangulate the so-called third resonance. What they found was not a location on Earth, but a point within the Earth. A perfect sphere suspended in the planet's molten layer. Impossibly stable, vibrating at 19.7 Hz. At this frequency, dreams began to synchronize. Those attuned to the books, readers, seers, sleepwalkers, began sketching identical images. A figure standing at the center of a darkened sphere, arms outstretched, with strings extending from the chest like threads of light, each thread connected to a face in the void. The message was always the same. You are all the same soul, forgetting itself one body at a time. Then came the fracture. At 3:03 a.m. GMT, seismic monitors across the globe recorded a vibration that was not geological but dimensional. It left no quake, no destruction, only sound. The same note, a low tone, too deep for human hearing, but enough to disrupt pacemakers, crash aircraft sensors, and cause lucid dreams in millions. One witness said it wasn't a sound at all. It was a summoning. In Jerusalem, a rabbi opened an ossuary sealed since the First Temple period. Inside was not bone but crystal. Embedded within the crystal, the shape of a human heart, still beating, a pulse timed perfectly to the resonance from beneath the earth. The rabbi died moments later, but not before scrawling one final line on the walls of the tomb. The heart never belonged to a man, it belongs to the book. Scholars began to realize the third consonance was never about a book. It was the reading itself, the act of remembering across multiple lifetimes. Each time a reader connected to the text, they were not learning something new. They were reclaiming something stolen, and something didn't want it returned. A secret faction within the Vatican, the Custodes Umbrae, had been monitoring this convergence for centuries. They held a forbidden manuscript chained within the crypt of St. Calixtus. It bore a warning written in the blood of its previous guardian. Should the three be remembered, the fourth will awaken. What is the fourth? They called it nomen nihil, the name of nothing. A concept, a being, a shadow that exists between the pulses of consciousness. It is not death. It is the refusal to be known. And now the fourth had begun whispering back. In the ruins of Göbekli Tepe, thermal imaging uncovered a sealed chamber beneath the central monolith. Within it, a perfectly preserved tablet, written in a language that predated Sumerian by millennia. The symbols were recursive, looping endlessly, like thought trying to remember itself. Those who saw it began dreaming of a tower not reaching into the sky but into the earth, built by voices, not hands, each floor a memory sealed away in a different age. At the base of this inverted tower stood the final door. It bore no keyhole, no hinges, only a mirror, and just hours ago something shifted again. The Earth's magnetic field rippled, briefly forming a perfect spiral over the South Atlantic anomaly. At its epicenter, satellites caught a glimpse of something emerging. Not a craft, not a structure. It matched the sketches from the dreamers. It matched the seal from the ossuary. It matched the pulse from the books. And then, in cities across the world, one sentence began appearing, etched into mirrors, whispered through speakers, printed in static and spoken by those who had never read a word of the book. You were never meant to die. You were meant to awaken. The sky no longer follows the same stars. The pulse now resonates in blood, and the door is beginning to reflect something new. The world had stopped dreaming. Not metaphorically, literally. Sleep labs across 5 continents reported the same anomaly. Rapid eye movement ceased. The brain entered a flat plateau, void of narrative, symbol, or illusion. But those under the monitors didn't awaken restless. Instead, they whispered one word upon rising. Allagash. No known language contained it, yet its syllables were found carved into ancient obsidian tablets in Peru, etched into bones unearthed in a Neolithic site in Ireland, and encoded within the harmonics of the third consonants. When decrypted, it meant the same thing in every context. The place before breath. Somewhere in the Nevada desert, a rogue researcher within DARPA, Dr. Hector Voss, reconstructed the resonance frequency using the schematics found hidden in the Vatican's sealed archives. When the 19.7 Hz tone was activated through a crystalline transducer, the air itself folded. Not bent, not distorted, folded, like pages in a book. And from that fold something looked back. The object that emerged wasn't a being, it was a geometry that resisted form. Eightfold, recursive, pulsating with symmetries no language could describe. Voss described it as a thought trying to remember the shape of God. Those in proximity lost all memory of their names. Some forgot how to speak. One technician wept, not from fear, but recognition. It was the moment before my birth. I remember now. I chose to forget. Global infrastructures buckled, not from war, not from economics, but from belief. Priests resigned. Astronomers stopped charting stars. AI systems trained to write poetry began generating recursive loops in dead languages. One server farm in Finland caught fire after printing the phrase, "Do not seek the author, become the sentence," over 900 million times. In Istanbul, a black obelisk once believed to be Ottoman in origin cracked open during a lightning storm. Inside, a sphere suspended in mercury reflecting not the faces of those who peered in, but the faces they would have worn had they made different choices. The Vitae Mysterium, Animam Refugit, and Silentium Orbis were not merely texts, they were harmonics. Each book was a frequency. Each frequency a strand of memory, and when activated together, they formed a chord. The chord of becoming. A sound older than thought. The sound before the Big Bang. And then it came, not in thunder, not in trumpet, but in recognition. The mirror beneath Göbekli Tepe vibrated. In its surface, the reflection of the earth faded, replaced by a vast library suspended in darkness. Each book pulsed with veins. Some screamed when opened, others whispered answers to questions no one dared ask. In the center of that library stood a figure, not man, not beast, but a silhouette made of shifting glyphs. It pointed toward the observer and said in 1,000 overlapping voices, "You have remembered enough, now you must choose." The door at the base of the inverted tower began to open, not outward but inward, like an iris. Beyond it, not a realm, not a paradise or punishment, a machine. Endless. Clockwork woven from light, symbols, and shadows. The mechanism of afterlife itself. But it was broken, and something was crawling through the gears. That was the fourth force, the no. It fed not on souls, but on unlived choices, on paths abandoned, on memories erased. It was not death. It was entropy given will. And now it knew we were looking. The book was never meant to tell us what happens when we die. It was meant to remind us that we were never meant to forget. All around the globe, mirrors stopped reflecting. They responded. Words appeared on every surface. Those who read it began to change, their voices layered, their eyes flickered with symbols. Time no longer moved forward for them, it looped, skipped, in some cases reversed. In the Mariana Trench, a seismic anomaly activated a long-dormant structure. The door, 2 miles wide, opened sideways, not into the sea, but into somewhere dry, somewhere old. And from its depths, a sound like every name you've ever forgotten, calling in unison, Come finish what we began when the stars were still learning how to burn. This is not the end. This is the remembering of the beginning.